The time is just gone 9:32 a.m. and we continue this morning with the show. And we are going to be joined shortly by Dr. Anas Altikriti. And we have learned about Pope Francis holding a historic meeting with Iraq's top Shi'ite cleric. And this is his visit to Iraq in the city of Najaf. Dr. Anas Altikriti, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome.
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Brother Inayat. It's a pleasure talking to you.
Well, I must say an absolute pleasure. I think you and I have spoken quite a while ago now. It's been a very, very long time, but alhamdulillah, you're looking well and great to be connecting with you once again.
Likewise. Thank you so much for having me.
Right now, just before we get to the talking about the Pope and his visit to Iraq, and just to look at Iraq at this point in time, where are we as far as Iraq is concerned? And we know since the occupation of Iraq, and so much has happened over the years. And just, Dr. Altikriti, just in your analysis in terms of how you see the politics of Iraq at this point in time, how these political dynamics are playing out, and what is just generally the latest in Iraq?
I think the last time you and I spoke when I was visiting South Africa, I think I drew quite a grim picture of the state of affairs in Iraq. It saddens me to say that things are far worse now, because added to all the problems that were created by the invasion and then occupation by the Americans and the Brits up until 2012 or 2010, when officially American troops left Iraq. Since then, we've had the episodes of Daesh, of ISIS. We've had continued sectarian targeting of various provinces and cities. And now, over the past 2 years, we've had corruption spiraling totally out of control to the level where Iraq, an oil-rich country, one of the most oil-rich countries in the world, that has 2 flowing rivers and that has some of the most fertile lands in the world, actually going into severe debt simply because the income is being siphoned by those in leading positions in Iraq. The situation is dire. The vast majority of Iraqis are living in miserable conditions. The basic amenities are not being provided. The squabbling over political gains is at its highest, and unfortunately, the outlook does not look any more hopeful than ever. It's quite a dire situation, unfortunately.
Well, certainly, and I think, obviously when one looks at even countries like Libya, for instance, and, all the chaos that has been created, and it appears, with Iraq, which basically gave impetus where we looked at a chaotic situation, the division amongst the people. Again, you mentioned the dire situation that people have been, and yet this was a country that held so much promise, a country with enormous wealth, but also in the Middle East in general, Iraq stood out as a beacon of light in terms of people, in terms of education, because these are the people that had the highest quality of education in the entire Middle East. And here we are in this very, very dire and sad situation, Dr. Anas.
Well, Iraq was in 1977 declared the first and at that time the only third world country that had eradicated illiteracy. Iraq had industries. It had become a small industrial country that had the promise of becoming quite a major contributor to at least the region. And regardless of the former regime, the Ba'ath regime being a dictatorial, brutal regime that every Iraqi wanted to get rid of, but the manner in which it was disposed and what's happened after, unfortunately led even the victims of the former regime yearn for the return of those dark days of Iraq, simply because days today are even darker. Iraq has been disseminated, and you're right, Brother Inayat. Iraq, alongside Egypt and Syria particularly, were seen as the countries to lead the entire region, the Middle East, out of the quagmire of darkness and the violence and the illiteracy and the such. But look at what's happened to all of those countries, unfortunately.
Yes, and incidentally, Dr. Anas Altikriti, we are looking at the month of Rajab. We know was the 28th of Rajab, which is this year 100 years since the fall of the Khilafah. And when we look at the glorious period of the Khilafah, the Abbasid dynasty, which was the golden age of Islam, and looking at Baghdad, looking at Iraq at that point in time, and 100 years later, really, it's a pitiful sight. But just coming to the issue we want to talk about, Pope Francis obviously now visiting Iraq, and he's held meetings with the senior Shi'ite cleric there as well. And we know he's visited quite a few countries over a period of time, and now with his latest visit in Iraq. Just your thoughts, what is the thinking behind the Pope visiting Iraq, particularly, where the country is at this point in time?
Well, I mean, it depends on how you look at it and from which angle you approach the subject. From one perspective, you could see this as a glorious historic moment. Iraq being chosen ahead of the vast majority of Arab and Muslim countries for the Pope's visit. You could see it as something to the credit of Iraq and something that the Iraqi people could make some advantage and leverage out of. From the other point of view, you could see this as another sort of colonial attempt at Iraq done under the guise of a papal visit. So it depends on how you look at it. But there's, I mean, no question that it was quite fascinating, even for Iraqis, what's happened in the lead up to the visit in terms of the country all of a sudden, the government all of a sudden finding the capacity to sweep clean the roads, to paint, buildings with a fresh lick of paint, to organize itself, the route particularly that the Pope was going to take, during his visit, to sort of provide the basic provisions that it has failed to do for Iraqis for the past 18 years. All of a sudden, it found within its reach, to do all these things. And therefore, Iraqis were making fun, saying, we only hope that the Pope would visit us once a week, because then maybe bit by bit, Iraqis would see clean streets, or would, find something to look forward to at least. It became almost farcical. The fact that the Pope had one of his most important stops, as well as making pilgrimage and paying homage to the city of Ur, which is acknowledged by all Abrahamic faiths to be, well, particularly the Christianity and Judaism, to be the birthplace of Ibrahim alayhi salam. Whether that's authentic or not is not for me to say, but the historical symbol of Ur being, in the eyes of many, one of the main capitals and focal points of Christians around the world, that is of course significant. But also alongside that, meeting with the Shi'i highest authority, Ali Sistani, Ayatollah Ali Sistani, is quite important. Now, I would personally put that down to the very simple fact that Christians in Iraq, which are part and parcel of the fabric of Iraqi society, just like Jews, by the way, just like Yazidis and the such. I mean, Iraq is a very diverse, multicultural, multi-faith society, and it has been for hundreds, thousands of years. Every single other section of Iraqi society have been brutalized, have been targeted, have been victimized by successive failed governments, since before independence, and as you put, from the fall of the Khilafah, the Ottoman Khilafah. Unfortunately, those haven't been protected. But as things have progressed, things have become worse. And by the time that this political system came into play, and then we had the subsequent episodes of Al-Qaeda, Abu Mus'ab al-Zarqawi, and the recent saga of Daesh, obviously the Christians felt a great deal of fear, persecution, and their numbers have fallen from over 1 million, or at least several hundreds of thousands, to less than 200,000 people left. The others have escaped. So in a way, the Pope wanted to meet with the highest authority who could control at least the most potent powers, military powers, and that is the Hasht, which is of a sectarian nature. It is of a Shi'ite tendency. And Ali Sistani would have a great sway in telling them to protect these communities. So in a sense, it was quite logical for him to meet with Ali Sistani. If there is anything to be said within that particular respect, is that whilst there was great razzmatazz made of the meeting with Ali Sistani as well as with the Kurdish leaders, unfortunately there wasn't a similar level of meetings or of face-to-face interactions with the Sunni community, and that sort of left several question marks hanging over the visit and whether it has achieved its objectives or not.
Well, in fact, this was the question I was going to ask, is because, just meeting certain sections of the community, and we've heard about the Pope visiting countries like Bangladesh, the United Arab Emirates, Turkey, and some of the other countries, talking about inter-religious dialogue. And, just focusing on certain sections of the community and leaving the others out obviously doesn't say much. And as you pointed out, very little in terms of engaging with the Sunni community, Dr. Anas.
Well, I mean, the thing is that, as you put it, I mean, this is in a way quite divisive because ultimately, for some reason, regardless, in my hope, and I believe the hopes of many around the world, they would like to speak of Iraq as one. They would like to speak of Iraqis as one, regardless of whether there be Sunni, Shiite, Muslim, Christian, Kurds, Arabs. It doesn't really matter. But unfortunately, the status quo that was cemented, that was rooted by the American-British invasion and occupation, is that Iraq is not one. You have, it's a sectarian political structure whereby the prime minister has to be a Shi'i, the president has to be a Kurd, where the head of parliament has to be a Sunni, and unfortunately everything has been divided along those lines. So if that is the status quo, it only makes sense that someone as esteemed and as high as the Pope, when visiting two of those three, meaning that the third left out, there's a reason. There's a question to be answered.
Well, certainly it is going to raise a lot more questions, but unfortunately, Dr. Anas Altikriti, time is of the essence, and I would have loved to engage with you a lot more, actually, but I'm sure at some point in time, we definitely will stay in touch. But for now, we say Jazakallah khairan to you for your time with us here on Salam Media this morning. Allah bless you. Allah keep you safe as well. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Alaikum assalam. Thank you so much, Brother Inayat. It's been my pleasure. Thank you.
Dr. Anas Altikriti with us this morning against the background of Pope Francis visiting Iraq.